Hey, how you doing?
Hi, Brandon.
How are you?
Good, doing well. Yeah, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
For sure.
Sorry for sending the questions a little later than anticipated.
No, it's all good. It's all good.
So, welcome Sohan Choudhury. Sohan is the co-founder and CEO of Flint. Flint is an AI-powered education platform built specifically for K through 12 schools. It helps teachers personalize learning by turning traditional assignments into interactive conversations, voice reflections, and process-based assessments, all powered by AI and large language models. Sohan, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Brandon.
So I'd love to learn a bit more about Flint. Can you give me a broad overview of some of the kind of more important features and some of the key use cases?
Yeah, absolutely. So Flint is a way that students and teachers can use AI within the same platform. And that's really important because students and teachers are using AI today, but using it very independently. And that can lead to problems. I think a very obvious problem is that students can go into something like ChatGPT, ask it to write their essay for them, and there's no guardrails in place. There's no visibility for teachers to see how they're using it. That's part of the problem we're solving at Flint. So we do give students a way to use AI, but in a way that their teachers can see and monitor and set guardrails for what that use looks like. And that opens up a lot of different use cases for personalized learning. One of my favorites is for world languages, where let's say if you're a Spanish teacher, no world language teacher will tell you that their kids are getting enough speaking practice. So with a tool like Flint, you can set the AI to speak in Spanish with your students at a set difficulty level using specific vocab words that you provide,
Mhm.
and they can go and give them live speaking practice. And if you zoom out, that sort of personalized learning experience is really hard to do in a classroom otherwise, because you have one teacher and many students, and Flip basically enables a teacher to scale themselves by having the AI do a lot of that personalization for them.
That makes sense. Yeah, I've played with the platform a little bit. So who are the target users? It's teachers and students in K through 12.
Exactly. Most of the time, you'll see teachers go and sign up independently, start using it with their students. Um, Rarely do students go in on their own and sign up for the first time, but once their teachers introduce it to them, they'll then go in on their own to like create a study guide or use it for some sort of personalized tutoring on their own.
What's the pricing model for Flint? Is it based on numbers of users? Do you have any enterprise level programs? Do you have partnerships with schools? What does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's designed to be mostly free for teachers signing up and using it for their students. So as a teacher, you can sign up entirely for free. You can use it for free with up to 80 people in your workspace. So that could be yourself and 79 students,
Okay.
which is, depending on how many students you have, at least enough to teach a few classes of your students or a few different sections of some different subjects. And then we do offer school-wide partnerships as well. So if you're a school and you want SIS LMS integrations, you want to have all users in the same workspace for better monitoring, let's say you have 500 or 1,000 students in your school, that's when we have enterprise pricing specifically for schools and districts.
Okay. So a user is a teacher or a student.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Any sense, or do you know exactly how many users you have currently?
Yeah, for sure. So right now we have around 100,000 students using the platform every month.
Mhm.
That's at least during the school year. So yeah.
Who are your biggest competitors?
Yeah, I would say there's a lot of companies that have sprouted up around the same time in the same space as us, building AI tools for educators.
Yeah.
But I don't view most of them as our competitors because they're focused on building teacher productivity tools, which we view as important, but not as critical as building tools for personalizing learning for students. So specifically in that category, I would say our main competitor is Khanmigo, which is a platform built and operated by Khan Academy. And
Mhm.
that does a lot of that kind of one-to-one tutoring piece as well. I think Khanmigo is a really good option for individual students and for students that are being homeschooled by their parents.
Mhm.
So in instances where they don't have access to a teacher who's a subject matter expert on everything they need to learn, Khanmigo has a lot of great pre-built curriculum, and Flint does not have pre-built curriculum. That said, I believe
Okay.
our strength is in customizing learning based on what the teacher puts in.
Yeah.
So Flint, unlike really any other platform, the teacher can go in, upload a 200-page PDF, and then create content specifically oriented around what they've put in.
Any idea how many schools are utilizing Flint?
Yeah, right now we're officially partnered with around 200 schools.
Mhm.
Those are schools on our enterprise tier that rolled it out using it officially. And there's a few thousand more that are just using it through their teachers trying it out for free.
So, can you talk a bit about how teachers are typically using Flint? Like, what are the typical use cases? For example, supplemental independent learning activities. Like, what are the typical ways they're using the platform?
Yeah, a real common way that teachers get started is using it as an exit quiz. So let's say you've just delivered a 45-minute lesson, you got 10, 20 minutes left, and you want to just understand what do your students actually retain. Typically, you'd print that out as a quiz or maybe assign it on Canvas, and you'd have to wait for your students to take that independently. It's like a dead zone during class, everyone's really quiet, and you
Yeah.
have to either go back and manually grade that, use some other tool to grade that, and then try to piece together where each of your students got stuck or what they did or didn't retain. With Flint, using that exit quiz kind of example, you can go and upload the slides or the readings that you did in class that day, have the AI go and quiz each student, and it will make sure to quiz students to the extent that it really understood what they didn't understand. So if a student gets stuck on question 3, it won't really move on to topic number 4 until the AI is done asking supplemental questions about that previous topic. And then for the teacher, you're getting a live view of exactly where each of your students are struggling. I would say that exit ticket use case is one of the most common ones. And then specifically for STEM classes, let's say you're like a computer science teacher or a math teacher,
Yeah.
if you have any instances of students working on problems in class, having the AI there as like a study buddy or a guide on the side can be very useful. Because let's say you have a bunch of students who are struggling with different problems at the same time in class, you can now have the AI give them that first line of help before you go in and split your focus and your time, go around the room and help students that are really struggling. We've talked to teachers that previously, before they were using Flint, when they had those sort of problem solving activities in class, they would have students go in and write their name on the board if they get stuck, and the teacher would go around. And the teacher would tell us, like, hey, I'm just not able to get through all the names by the time the class is done. There's just too many students that need help.
Yeah.
Now with Flint, because the AI is providing so much help, they're able to consistently get through all the names on the board because there's so few areas that the AI is not able to actually go in and help the student through the problem with.
I was going to save this for later, but how do you interface with teachers? So, in other words, you're developing this platform. I see you have multiple subjects. How do you get information or feedback from teachers in terms of what they want in the platform?
Yeah, absolutely. So our team is around 8 people today. And I would say for
Oh,
the majority of people, yeah, so we're a relatively small team,
yeah.
but for the majority of people on our team, I would say for at least 4 or 5 of us, myself included, our main part of our job is constantly talking to users.
Yeah.
So that's true for folks working on sales, like myself, customer success, and especially people work on the product development side of things. So the whole engine behind Flint is an engine of people going out, talking to teachers using the platform, understanding what feature requests they want, and then interfacing with engineers on our team to make sure those features are built and maintained properly. So ways we do that are we will definitely, whenever teachers reach out to us proactively with feedback or want to hop on a call, we are always open to that, like almost 100% of the time.
Yeah.
On top of that, we also reach out to users based on their usage patterns. So we don't collect much data at Flint for ourselves. Most of it's just used to operate the platform. But some of the data we do collect is on how often people are using the tool. So if we see any drop-offs in usage from some users, we will immediately reach out to them to kind of understand what went wrong or how we can improve. And then one of my favorite ways of collecting feedback is we'll just go and visit schools. So
Yeah.
around once a month, we try to make an effort to go and visit one of our partner schools. And what I like to say is like that's like drinking from a fire hose of product feedback. Like you'll be able to not only see how people are actually using the tool in real time, pick up on any issues that they're not otherwise mentioning to you, but people just spitball with you. They'll mention new ideas they have. A lot of the feature we built into Flint came from those in-person sessions.
Yeah.
So we actually didn't have speech support way back. We only had writing kind of like back and forth text support. And we were talking to a French teacher at a school in Rhode Island that we happened to be visiting. And she was like, yeah, this is great, but like,
Huh.
guys, like the main thing I want to use this for is speaking assignments. And somehow that thought had kind of crossed my co-founder and I's mind, but we didn't really prioritize it. And right after that meeting, we went back, built that, and had it shipped within 2 weeks. So just having a very close iteration loop and visiting schools is absolutely key for us.
So, is a lot of this reactionary? In other words, teachers must have so many ideas for tools and features in the platform. Like, I imagine there's such an influx of that information.
Yeah, for sure. And I think very quickly, probably like within 3 months of launching the product and working with schools, we realized that like there was just too much feedback, right? Which is like a great problem
Yeah.
to have. We don't want to let that like limit how much feedback we get. And some of it is easy of like what you do with it, right? Some of it's like, okay, we just have to prioritize the most important things. Anything around student safety or privacy goes to the top of the list, then followed by like the most popular requests we're getting for
Yeah.
like improving learning or whatever that might be. What we realized though is like with every version of the product that we build, and we probably ship like a major version 2 to 3 times a year, there's like a ceiling to how much we can add onto that version before it
Yeah.
gets too clunky and like unwieldy.
Okay.
So there are many times where we will just go through, rewrite everything from scratch. And when we do that, we really look at what the backlog of requests is that we haven't been able to get to. And we design the next version of Flint in a way that will be able to accommodate all these future requests that we've had to say no to. So we're actually in the middle of that right now, where we are rebuilding Flint from scratch, from the bottom up, literally
Oh,
rewriting every line of code. And we're going to be launching that new version in around a month, so around mid-July. So really excited about that. And the main reason we're doing that, to kind of come back to your question, is we've had all these cool feature requests over the last year that we just haven't been able to get to in this current version. It would just add way too many buttons and just make the UI too confusing.
yeah.
So we're like, yeah, we need to refresh everything and start from scratch. And because we have all this backlog of feature requests, we have a better idea what our direction will be, at least for the next 6 months. So we know that this next version will have a little bit more, shelf life than our previous versions.
Okay, so great segue. How did you build Flint initially? What does the tech stack and backend look like now, and where is it going? How are you going to develop the next version?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, there have been a lot of different versions of Flint. I think we're on, like, internally we call it like V5 or V6 now. So, and
Okay.
every time, every one of those versions is one where we've totally rewritten the entire code base. So there's a lot of chaos in how we do development. It's like intentional chaos of just, we just constantly want to be, resetting how we do things and making sure we're moving as fast as possible. The very, very first version of Flint is actually one that I built myself. So my background's in software engineering. And yeah, I built the original version of Flint using a lot of help from ChatGPT. I was just using GPT-4 at the time, which had just come out, I think, like the month before. And yeah, there's a pretty basic kind of like, I think it was like a Next.js app using like React as like the front
Okay.
end. And then we were using GPT-4 as like the main large language model. And then that was really it. It was a very, very simple app to help teachers make like activities and worksheets and that sort of thing.
Hmm.
Flint's evolved a lot since then. On the development side, there's two main things I'll share that are pretty interesting. One is that we actually made a switch late last year, I think around November last year, to go from primarily using OpenAI models to actually switching over to Anthropic. So at
Oh,
that time, I think we were using GPT-4, 4.1, something like that, whatever the state of the art was at that point from OpenAI. And we actually switched over to Claude 3.5 Sonnet. And although in benchmarks, 3.5 Sonnet doesn't look much better, for our product, it made all the difference because Claude's generally Anthropic's models, what we found, are really good at following instructions. So in Flint, when we want the AI to act as a teaching assistant, we want it to behave in a certain way. We don't want it to give away answers to students. And Claude's really good at following the instructions we give it and the instructions that teachers provide it. So yeah, we've been using Claude now as the main model under the hood. That will likely continue to be the case. We're currently internally testing Claude 4, and right now the production version of Flint still uses Claude 3.7. And then the other big change from our end is, this year we had like a massive plan to hire a lot of engineers. We started the year with around 2 engineers, which again, really small for the amount of users we're serving. It was just our CTO and we had one engineer. So it was the two of them. And we had a plan to hire like 4 or 5 engineers by this time this year, and we've hired zero. And the reason for that is Claude Code, which is Anthropic's product that helps software developers use
yeah.
AI to write code, is now writing most of the software behind Flint. So
All
we're
right.
using so much AI to write code that it's totally changed our hiring expectations. And funny enough, we are now hiring an engineer. We realize we kind of hit the limit of how much AI can use. We kind of need more human hands on deck. But even then, the role of the person we're looking for is almost a hybrid of someone who's a really good developer, but someone who has those management skills because they're managing AI in a sense. And communication is actually like really, really important to make effective use of AI as a developer. So yeah, I would say that's probably the most interesting thing for me to watch is like, when I started working on Flint, AI and where it was at was like helpful to me as a developer. And I think I'm like an okay developer. I'm not like, extraordinary. Um, Now for me, it's totally surpassed what I can do.
Yeah.
And I'm working with some of the best developers I've ever met in my life, which is my co-founder and the engineer we have on our team. And they're at this point where it's like totally assisting them to get to this next level of productivity. So I'm like super excited about how much more AI will accelerate software development.
It's a crazy loop, right? So you're basically using AI to code an AI platform.
Exactly. And funny enough, I think there's this interview that Anthropic CPO gave recently where he said that 90 to 95% of the code behind Claude Code, which is their AI agentic software developer, is written by Claude Code. So like it's all just one loop. Yeah, it's crazy.
So it sounds like the first version of this was basically vibe coded. To use ChatGPT to create this app. How did you come up with the idea? Like, what was the problem you saw, I guess, in education that caused you to come to build this first version of Flint?
Yeah, for sure. So I was just reflecting on my journey through like the public school system. I grew up in Fairfield, Connecticut.
Okay.
Uh, generally really solid school district, Fairfield Public Schools. But pretty much at every point through my academic journey, I didn't feel that engaged. Like there were definitely some highlights, and those all those highlights came from teachers that were really engaging and like
Mm,
went out of their way to like really keep me engaged and challenge me in the classroom. But I was just generally surprised by how much of a lack of personalization there was in schools. So growing up, I was really fortunate that I had parents that would literally teach me stuff at home. So my dad like taught me math growing up, and I saw this very clear difference in the quality of instruction I was getting one-on-one, where my dad was able to see where I was struggling and really challenge me, versus in a classroom where there's 25 other kids. The teacher's doing their best, but there's so many different levels of students to cater to. And you end up sticking to this median level where some
yeah.
students are stuck and really struggling, and other ones are really bored in class. So I kind of just accepted that this is how education is done. And I think that's what society's done largely. We've accepted that education is largely inefficient. You're gonna have this one-to-many problem. We've known for decades that one-to-one is the answer, but like, how will you possibly do one-to-one? So when I was playing around with GPT-4 in like I think April or May of 2023, whenever it was launched, I realized like, oh, this is actually might be the solution to this long-standing problem. But that isn't where I immediately started building. I actually then just immediately went and reached out to all my middle school and high school teachers
Yeah.
just to reconnect with them and talk to them and hear about what problems they were facing. And as I started to uncover some of their problems when it comes to student engagement and generally how much time they were spending creating materials for their classes, that's when I started working on the first initial version of Flint. So it was always this like lack of personalized learning in education that like has driven me and driven my co-founder. And then I would say like, still from day one, we were talking to teachers to make sure, okay, we're actually building something they're going to go out and use. We're not just building something in a silo based on what we think their needs are.
So it sounds like from day one it was reactionary. Were those first features that you built based on teacher feedback?
Yeah, absolutely. So the very first feature we built was a worksheet generator in Flint.
Yeah.
So every single day we were building that product out. We were talking to multiple teachers, understanding exactly what they needed.
Yeah.
We actually ended up pivoting away from that direction to build something more student facing around a month down the line. But even the reason we pivoted away to that direction to be more student facing was because we started talking to a few schools that were really excited about the student angle, which is where our passion really was.
So this focuses on K through 12. I can see why, right? Because you saw the problem. Is there any reason why this couldn't be used by a college student? Have you thought about, I guess, specifically targeting colleges in a different way? Is it that the subjects are so nuanced? That's why you didn't initially go in that direction?
Yeah, it's a great question. The short answer is like it definitely can be used in colleges. We do have a number of college professors using it
Yeah.
actively with students, kind of on the free tier. The only reason that we are not going after the higher ed market is just a lack of bandwidth and focus from our team. That's really it. I
Yeah.
honestly think it's a massive opportunity. If we don't do it, someone else is going to do it. So I really hope that we're the ones to do it. But for us, for like personally looking at our company, I want us to really dominate the K-12 market and then
Yeah.
expand. That said, I could see multiple ways of doing this. I could see us expanding the team, expanding our GTM team more aggressively in the short term,
Right.
going after colleges more sooner. But yeah, like fundamentally, like colleges also could benefit from better personalized learning. There's no real limit to the level of difficulty the AI can tackle, especially for undergrad level courses. And yeah, we've seen like college, computer science professors use it for like the types of classes I took back at Georgia Tech, and works great. So there's no real like implementation reason. It's just more of like a matter of marketing and sales, and like focus from our end.
Yeah, and I could see you have kind of a predefined list of subjects, right? But I could imagine like the process would be the same for new subjects. It might just be more nuanced.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
So you studied computer science at Georgia Tech, but you started launching startups pretty early. When did you realize you wanted to build companies and not just write code?
Yeah, for sure. So I actually thought I really wanted to write code. For the first couple of years, I like, when I went to Georgia Tech, I knew like nothing about software development or nothing about coding. So my goal was like, okay, even the way I landed at Tech is like I went down the list of the top computer science undergrad programs, applied to all of them, or applied to like the top 20. Tech was the best one I got into. So I was like, all right, I'm going here.
Mhm.
And when I got to Tech, I was like very, very focused on just being a really good engineer. So for the first 2 years, all I focused on was like getting really good at software development, writing code, and getting software development internships because that's what all my friends that were better than me at writing code were doing at Tech.
Right.
And my sophomore year, I interned at Amazon. So in my head, I was like, oh, I've made it. Like I made it into the big league, like the big company. I was out in Seattle with my friends working there. It was like super exciting. And I absolutely hated the work. And that's when I kind of realized like, okay, maybe software development isn't for me. I felt like too much like I was like hogging a machine.
Yeah.
And I realized that like, especially at a really, really big company in Amazon, Amazon's like on the extreme end of this, like one of the biggest software, organizations in the world. You could be working at Amazon for 10 years and not still have a say on how things are done, right?
Yeah.
And not have much agency. And I saw that around me, some of the people that were there from like literally like, year two of Amazon starting, that were like on the same team that I was working on. So I left that internship feeling like, okay, I don't know if software development is what I want to go into. Like, yeah, I'll still like apply to more internships and stuff, but like I really started to look elsewhere. And around this time, like I started working on some side projects with friends. And in the course of doing those side projects, I happened to be writing a lot of code. And I started, we called them companies, but they were really just side projects. So we
Right.
weren't really big ourselves. And I realized I really enjoyed writing code. I was like, oh, that's weird. I hated writing code at Amazon, but I really like writing code here when it's like me and like four other people. Maybe it's the team size and the agency. I feel that's a real difference.
Yeah.
So for me, like I think there's probably other things that could give me that same level of excitement. But so far, I've only tried two things. I've tried working at a big company and working on something really, really tiny. And working on something really, really tiny gives me a sense of agency mixed with that engineering kind of sense of building and that satisfaction of building. That has just kept me going. So that's kind of when I started working on in like 2019, 2020, working on some projects that ended up becoming startups.
Mhm.
And yeah, just kind of kept going down that path just because like I just enjoy the day to day. There's no master plan. I just enjoy it. So keep doing it.
It's amazing that you saw this so early. Like it takes a lot of people like 10, 20, 30 years to realize they don't want to work for a big company.
Yeah, no, I got really lucky with that. But I will say back when I was at Amazon, I did not feel lucky. I was like, because everyone around me was like really enjoying it, or a lot of people around me were
Oh,
really
okay.
enjoying it. I was like, oh man, I wish I loved it here because I worked so hard to get to that point. I was like really
Yeah.
happy to be working there forever.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just wasn't my cup of tea.
Before Flint, you co-founded a company called Gatherly.
Yeah.
What is this platform? Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, Gatherly was like I think it was like my first real kind of foray into startups. During COVID, basically, my friends and I were stuck at home, kind of taking Zoom classes. We attended a particularly invisible Zoom birthday. And if you've ever been to a Zoom birthday
Oh, yeah.
party before, not but like, yeah, I mean, so it was like 30, it was like one of my friends. And there's like, 30, 40 people on the Zoom call. He was trying to have a conversation with one of them. Everyone else was just sitting there, like just watching this conversation. It's super awkward, right? So we got off that call, and a few of us, including my friend Chris, whose birthday it was, I decided like, what if we built something better than this, right? Like a better alternative to it. What we came up with was Gatherly. The idea behind Gatherly is that instead of being on one big Zoom call, you can basically have multiple parallel Zoom calls going at once. And like in a physical room, you navigate around this virtual room
Oh,
on a map. So you have like this 2D kind of like 8-bit avatar that you use to walk around a
yeah.
room. You can go and talk to other people in the room, and basically I could talk to you for 5 minutes. I can go and talk to someone else for 5 minutes. You don't have to watch a conversation if you don't want to. We built this as a side project again because we were just like fed up during COVID. And to our surprise, people actually liked using it and they started offering us money to use it. They're like, hey, I've got a club meeting coming up for my school. Can I pay you guys like $50 to use it?
Hmm.
And we were like, whoa, that's an insane amount of money. We never thought we could make money for this. We're
Sure.
just doing it for fun. And one thing led to another. And over that summer, I ended up rescinding or ended up reneging on it, offered to join Lyft as an engineering intern that summer, the summer of 2020. Worked on Gatherly full time. We ended that summer with around $80,000 in revenue. And I was like, wow, this is amazing.
You made
I'm
it.
not gonna go back to school next semester. I'm just gonna do this.
Yeah.
And did that for another semester. It came to deciding, am I gonna go back to school in the spring or not? And this was a big decision because if I didn't, it was essentially dropping out because the chance I'd go back later and finish my degree is basically zero. And at that point, we were at $800,000 in revenue. So I was like, if I skipped a semester at 80, I should definitely skip another semester at 800. And yeah, went from there. We ended up scaling the company to around 15 people at its peak. It was the reason I dropped out of college, so I never went back to Georgia Tech. I kind of finished 3 years there, and that was it. And yeah, looking back, it was an awesome experience. I worked on it for around 3 years. I did leave to start Flint, and then around 6 to 12 months after I left, my remaining co-founders actually were able to get the business acquired. So Gatherly is still functional today.
Oh,
It's
it's
basically an event services company. But yeah, it was my first real experience doing startups. It was very chaotic, but I really loved it.
so at Flint, you've gone from co-founder and engineer to CEO. Tell me about that transition. Has that been challenging for you?
Yeah, for sure. So It actually wasn't challenging, but the main reason for that is I found an awesome co-founder. So the
Okay.
very first like 2 or 3 weeks of starting the company, I was just wearing all the hats. I was, you know, founder, I was CEO, I was CTO, I was writing
Mhm.
code at night, talking to users in the day, and it was just a lot. It was a lot to manage. I was very fortunate to partner up with my current co-founder. His name is Jinso. I met him at my last company at Gatherly. He was like our first engineering hire there, and he was like the best engineer I've ever worked with, and just like a really brilliant product mind. Like he just had so much to offer. So we started to get talking. I like showed him what I was building at Flint. And yeah, within like very quickly, like within 2 weeks of starting the company or something like that, he ended up joining. So that was awesome. And that really let me focus more on the CEO role as he took on the CTO role. And at the early stage, it's not glamorous because there's two people, like the CEO, you're the
Yeah.
CEO of like yourself and your friend, right? So there's not much you're like running really. But it let me really double down on focusing on sales, which for me was like something I was really nervous about because at Gatherly, I was CTO. I'd only really written code and worked with engineers.
Yeah.
Now there's no reason for me to do that because the person I was working with, my co-founder, just so much better than me at that.
Yeah.
So the thing I had to really go and do is demonstrate my ability at sales. And I'd never done any sales before. I tried briefly at Gatherly and just like kind of nothing, accomplished nothing. So yeah, I just focused full time on sales, basically as soon as Jinso joined, and that's been the case ever since. So yeah, I pride myself on my focus on sales, especially because it's like pretty new for me, working at Flint.
So how do you feel about writing code now? I've talked to a bunch of people who have transitioned into leadership roles and they essentially stop writing code. And I've been at various stages of my career where I wasn't writing code. Do you miss it? Like I always found, or I still do sometimes, that I miss writing code. I miss that headspace.
Yeah, definitely time to time. It's funny you asked me that, and right now it's actually great timing. Earlier this week, I don't know if you can still tell, I felt a little bit under the weather. Had like a brief cold or something like that.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, like I can't do some of these sales meetings. I'm just like not up to it. Offloaded those to a member of our team, and I had some extra time to kill. I was just like
Yeah.
kind of sitting in bed. I was like, I got some extra time, so I actually went back to coding earlier this week,
Oh, yeah.
just for fun. Not working on Flint, but just working on some side projects because I don't want to mess with the flow that our team currently has. And I think the part of coding that always excited me the most, it was never the syntax or like the physical act of like writing every line of code. It was the satisfaction of building something. You get this immediate high of just
Yeah.
like, whoa, I had this idea and now like look at it. I can click it. Like my friend can click it. It's just like
Yeah.
really, really fun, right? And I was able to put together like two quick side projects, probably in like 8 hours of coding this week between 2 different days. And I did that without writing a single line of code because I was using Claude code the entire time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for me, like writing code is like way more fun than before because I don't even have to write the code and I get all the satisfaction of the enjoyment of doing it. Now,
Right.
granted, like I'll work on pretty simple side projects that are like, you know, not something multiple people need to work on. There's no advanced features. I don't really care about what's happening to the data. Like I'm stuff I'm building for myself and my friends. But the satisfaction of being an engineer is like really easy to get nowadays because of these AI tools. So not to make everything about AI, but I will say that's made coding at least much more enjoyable for me just in the last few days.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. Because of AI, you get to that immediate gratification even more immediately,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, oh, I wonder if my program could do this. And if it, normally would take whatever, 2 hours to code, it's like basically a couple of minutes and you get there immediately.
Exactly. Yeah, I had this moment where I was like, "Oh, I wonder if I can make this app I was making." Not to go too in depth to it, was like a generative Wikipedia. So you could put in a topic, and it would generate a Wikipedia article as you go, and you could click on different sections and dive in further into any kind of rabbit hole you want to go down into.
Yeah.
Because I spend a ridiculous amount of time just reading random Wikipedia articles just for
Yeah.
fun. And I just had this idea. I threw it into Claude Code. I went to scrolling on Twitter on my phone. I come back 5 minutes later and like the basics are built for me. And then I'm just kind of fine tuning and telling it, oh, actually stream the text, don't have a loading icon, things like that. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's just it's actually way too ezy nowadays.
Yeah, be careful with those side projects. With your history, they're going to become companies.
Yeah, hope not. I really love Flint, so I hope not. Yeah.
What does your product philosophy look like at Flint? So how do you build for something as complex and human as the classroom?
Yeah, we always like our bar for like what personalizing learning looks like is really, really high. And I think what we've built right now is a great activity slash like, yeah, it's a great like alternative to an activity or alternative to a quiz in the classroom,
Yeah.
but it's not truly personalizing level for students all the time. So our view is anything we build should get us closer to a student's needs being met 24/7, both in and outside of the classroom.
Mm.
So right now, like a lot of our product philosophy is like we're looking at what are the bottlenecks to doing that right now. One of the big bottlenecks is data. Like we do not have all the information
Mm.
about the student's learning journey that we need to really personalize things, right? And that's where a lot of the teacher superpower comes from, is the teacher kind of picks
Oh,
up on students' characteristics,
right.
generally what areas you've been struggling on. Maybe if I'm an English teacher, I had a conversation with a student's history teacher, and I heard they were struggling on a certain topic, like that same student that I teach. That additional context is gonna, in subtle ways inform how I teach that student. And that's data that Flint currently has some access to, but we're not really doing a good job of using.
I
And a
see.
lot of that data exists in the school's LMS or SIS. So one of the big bottlenecks we're thinking through is like, how can we use more of that data to better personalize the student's entire learning journey? Eventually, what this product can look like, and someone will build this, it's just such a no-brainer idea. We
Yeah.
really want to be the ones that do it, is every student in K-12 will have a teaching assistant that goes with them through kindergarten through 12th grade. And it knows everything about what they're good at learning, what they're struggling with. It's always there to help them. It can offer proactive suggestions, and it works dynamically with the teachers, right? When the student goes into 7th grade and they've been struggling with pre-algebra the year before, that AI teaching assistant might send that teacher a message letting them know, here's what the student might need extra help on. Here's some extra activities you can give them in unit 4 of this year to help them, make up for that kind of lost material from the previous year. That vision is like really clear. It's like we just, like if schools had a limited staff, this is what they would do. Um, and we're so far away from building that. So anything we can
Wow.
get, I'll get as closer to that vision is really what we prioritize.
That's amazing to think of it that way. An AI assistant for 12 grades that gets to know each student individually and tracks their progress, their entire learning journey.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
How are kindergarten and first grade students using Flint?
Yeah, it's really limited at those ages. So I think
Yeah.
that's also another piece. Like, can we actually make it useful for them? Right now, it's really 3rd grade and up is where we get most of
Okay.
the use of it. Yeah, we'll see some first, 2nd grade teachers using it, but sometimes it'll be like a group activity where like, even it'll be the teacher putting out Flint on the smart board, and then the whole class will be kind of brainstorming, what do we tell the AI, and let's see what it says back to us. Um, so yeah. Yeah.
So you've talked a little bit about this, about interfacing with teachers to learn about new tools and features. How do you add a new subject? So I see like ethics is on the list. I don't know if that's new, how new that is or not. What's the process? Like, okay, we're going to add a new subject. Do you have to consult with hundreds of teachers who teach ethics to come up with like, what is the workflow even going to look like? What's the content? What are the specific tools? What does that process look like?
Yeah, for sure. So the way the product is built is actually very generalizable. In Flint, we actually don't have any different UI for different subjects.
Oh, okay.
You can create an activity for any subject, like in any intersection of any subject. It's really customizable. And then what we do is we look through the data to see, are there new subjects that people are using it for this month that are like new? Like, okay,
Mm,
ethics, right? We haven't seen ethics before. Okay, let's go further into that. When we see a critical mass of users creating things for a new subject, maybe that is because, they just happen to discover the platform, or there's some other feature we launch which now suddenly makes that feature, that kind of area possible. For example, when we launched image support, a lot of design and arts kind of types of activities started popping up. Then we'll go out and talk to those teachers, understand how they're using it,
mhm.
and mainly use that to inform content we create about that use case. So then we'll put up a website page saying like, hey, here's how you can use Flint for ethics, or here's how you can use it for design.
I
And then
see.
that content will be based off of what we heard from the users. But in terms of the platform itself, our view is if we just mimic tools accessible in the classroom, like humans have eyes, okay, we should give the AI vision support. Humans can use a whiteboard, okay, we should let students in the AI use a whiteboard. The use cases will follow because the
Yeah.
creativity in our view should ultimately come from humans and from teachers and students. All we're doing is just marketing out those use cases to more people to tell them, hey, look at these cool things that these people are already doing.
It's kind of like ChatGPT in a way where there were probably some initial use cases that were predicted, but then people are using it for all these hundreds or thousands of other things that are surprising. So then there's tools that are developed around those use cases.
Exactly. And from our end, the last thing you want to do is limit that because like there's no way we're going to be able to think of everything, right? It's all so new.
Right.
But also we are very like cognizant of the fact that like my co-founder and I are not educators. We do have an educator on our team now. He's awesome, but
Okay.
at the end of the day, the majority of our team are not educators. So we don't want to be coming in and saying, here's the way you have to use this tool. We
Yeah.
always just want to be, creating something very adaptable and then always kind of responding to how users are using it.
What's the next subject you're going to add?
Yeah, good question. So I am excited about the kind of design, art, and music kind of aspect of things.
It's funny. That was the one thing I was like, oh, there's nothing around art or music. And then I was thinking that's probably like next level difficult.
Yeah, that is what excites me, that it is next level difficult.
Yeah.
We've already seen teachers use it in some interesting ways there. For example, we've seen some teachers go in and have the AI present example artwork to the student. And these can be artwork from files they've uploaded or ones that
Yeah.
the AI is generating. And they'll have the students critique the AI art. And what they found is that students are much more willing to critique art when it's presented by an AI as opposed to presented by a human, because then they feel bad. I'm like, oh, am I like,
Oh,
critiquing someone's art that like someone really put a lot of time and energy
right.
into. So yeah, there's some unique use. Like even that is something that I likely would have never thought of, but we've seen people already kind of use it in interesting ways. So even the reaction you had there, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. A lot of our marketing is like, okay, that's a cool story. Now let's tell more people about that
Yeah,
story.
right.
They'll also start thinking like, oh, I could use it this way. So yeah, I'm interested to see what that'll look like. And then we've had some music teachers use Flint. They want to have their students play music into the platform, have it give feedback on that. Can't really do that yet accurately, but I think
Yeah.
the next generation of models will hopefully be better at that. So
And what about the academic side of music, like how to read music, if that's something that could be implemented?
for sure, yeah, we've definitely seen some people do that where they can upload, picture sheet music, ask the
Yeah.
AI questions about how to play it or understand it. So yeah.
What's a feature or tool in Flint you're particularly proud of? Something that's not obvious.
Yeah, so there's one that, yeah, really isn't obvious because you have to be using Flint for a while to get a lot of value out of this. And it's one of those things where like the more you use it, the more valuable it is. But when you first sign up, it's not really that useful. And it's how we do analytics. So at a school level,
Oh,
you can see, if you go with the school enterprise a level of Flint, you can see how everyone at your school is using the platform, right? You can see how many teachers have used it, how many students, how often are the teachers using it, what subjects are they using it for. We have kind of graphs and like numbers, charts and stuff for all that basic data. But you can go really deep with that data. We let you actually chat with Flint in a way that Flint can go and query and analyze the data for you. So you
oh,
could go in and say something like, what are the 5 most interesting activities that our math teachers have used Flint for? Flint will go through, find those activities, pull them up for you, give you the teachers' names and the links to those activities. You can go in as a teacher. Let's say if you're using it with your class consistently, you can say, hey, Flint, I'm a biology teacher or whatever. Which of my students have been proactively asking the most questions? Or which of my students have been struggling the most? And can you tell me what topics they've been struggling with? And Flint can go through months and months worth of data and find those answers for you.
hmm
It's really like having a teaching assistant that has like superhuman memory and is
yeah.
able to cite exactly where it's pulling questions and information from. And teachers do this in like a lot of small ways, just in their own heads of like, oh, I noticed these 2 kids have been asking a lot of questions. Maybe let me challenge them with some more content.
Mm.
There's never enough data, right? And you're only getting that data through a lot of the human interaction, not through the assignments they're doing at home. And because so much of using Flip for students is conversational, the quality of that analytics data is really a key selling point for people that have been using the platform for a while.
So let's talk about detection tools. I know that you've argued that detection tools aren't the answer to AI cheating. Redesign is the answer. What do you mean by that? And how does that look in practice?
Yeah, I wish I had a better answer. We don't have like the perfect solution. So unfortunately, detection tools don't work.
Yeah.
And I almost wish they did because they would be immensely valuable to educators, right? We don't want students to cheat on
Yeah.
writing their essays. But also, it's like the number one feature request we get is how do we know the content students are putting into Flint is authentic? Are they just going to ChatGPT, using that to generate some answers and plugging that into Flint? It'd be great if we could turn around and say, no, look, we can tell you with 85% confidence that this is AI generated, so you should like catch the student for cheating, right? Unfortunately, these AI detectors just don't work, and they're getting worse over time.
Yeah.
So the better AI models get, the better they can mimic, human reasoning, human thinking, and even write in a way that a struggling student would write. So they're really, really hard to catch. So our advice to schools is like, don't invest any time or energy, if possible, into AI detectors. It's like going in the opposite direction where we need to be heading. Assessment redesign sounds very scary, and it can be, but there are limited ways in which you can implement it that are going to give you a much better view into understanding student thinking, which I think is the main goal of understanding and assessing students properly.
Mhm.
So that can be as simple as like if a student's writing a paper, have them submit multiple drafts, and when you give them feedback on each of their parts of their writing, have them respond and reflect that feedback in their next version. If there's more steps where students need to show the reasoning behind their thinking and need to walk through that directly one-on-one with the teacher, it's going to be much harder for them to use AI because there's so much more context they need to provide to the AI. And at that point, they might as well demonstrate their real thinking as well. Another case would be in instances where it's not a writing assignment. Maybe you're just testing for the students' understanding of some content. You could have them do a live speaking conversation, right? Let's say you wanted to understand if a student really understood the ins and outs of some historical event, right? Let's say you're teaching history. If you weren't sure if they cheated on a quiz, you maybe sit them down and just grill them on the topic. Like, hey, do you really understand JFK's speech about the Cuban Missile Crisis? Like, let me just ask you
Right.
10 rapid fire questions. Let's see how on the spot you respond. That's a great way of assessing, but it's not possible to do because like you have so many kids and so few teachers. But AI can do that, right? And with a tool like Flint, you can have the AI go through and grill each student for 10 minutes. You can make it so they can't type to the AI, they have to speak. Obviously, if they have their friend talk to them, you can just hear that their voice is different. So it's really easy to prevent cheating. And the level of assessment is much more richer than before. So I would say that cheating still does exist, and it will likely still ramp up in many ways due to AI tools for students getting better over time. But the conversation schools should be having are what are these small ways we can start moving towards assessment redesign, even if it's replacing exit tickets and exit quizzes as a starter. Um, so that's generally my advice to schools. I wish we could say we're like an anti-cheating tool, but like we can't make that claim. And I would be very skeptical of any company that makes that claim because it's like we've looked at the tech, it's just not possible to do it.
How do you feel about programming? So you know how to program, you learned how to program. Now you use AI to generate code, but you understand what you're getting. I know how to program. Where is programming going? Do students need to know this? Will they need to know how to program? Is it still going to be useful for at least a few years to know how to program and to be able to interpret the AI generated code that they get from a tool?
Yeah, so I think the amount of time that students will spend practicing programming will go down. In the same way that like if you're going to be a physicist, you need to
Yeah,
understand calculus, but like the amount of time you're spending in your job doing calculus is like a very small percentage compared to like if you're a physicist 40, 50 years ago or like even
right.
80 years ago. So like the implementation of like day-to-day practicing that skill will go down, but you still need to understand the basics. The reason for that is in programming, even when I'm using AI coding tools, I move a lot faster than someone who doesn't know how to code
Yeah,
because the AI will still run into issues. And I can help it debug those issues.
right,
And I can give it a certain direction to move in that I just know, hey, this is the thing that would have taken me less time. So I'll just tell the AI to do that. Because time is still time. Even if
right.
time cost has been scaled down, I still want to move as fast as possible. And I would say like a great example or like a good analogy I'd use here is like, let's say AI in the future is really, really good at writing, right? And like we get to this future. I don't believe this will happen because I think there's a lot of reasons why AI can get much better at writing compared to something like coding or math. But
Yeah,
let's say in the future, right? AI writes like a New York Times best-selling, novel. The person who prompts the AI to write that will still probably be a really, really good writer because they'll know how to prompt it, how to revise it, and they'll have the sense of taste of like what is good writing versus what isn't. I
yeah,
doubt that will come from someone who's not an English speaker, for example, if it's an English book, or from someone who doesn't have a good grasp of what good writing looks like. So there's this element of taste and like be able to guide the AI that is still
yeah.
really important. And I think you can get that best by doing it yourself. So I think it's like the same reason why we, expect even computer science majors today to learn math. Like, when I was in school, I was like, why am I learning discrete math? I'm just going to go be a software developer. Well, it turns
Right.
out it actually really helps. So I think it'll be like that. I think students will still learn how to code, but then implementation will not look like coding at all.
So one thing I've done in my programming class is kind of like what you were talking about with writing assessments is having students in person answer questions and write code on paper, or at least pseudocode. So they can do their programming at home. I don't know what type of AI, how much of it is AI generated. It's difficult to tell, but at least there's those certain touch points in class where they have to answer questions in a live situation with no other resources. They have to know, I guess, essentially how to program.
Exactly. Yeah. And when I look back to my time at tech, and I didn't go to college like that long ago, but it was definitely pre large language models.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the tests we had were handwritten. I was handwriting functions in Java and Python
Yeah.
in a blue notebook, and that's what I was submitting as my final. There's no way I could have cheated. I would have gotten kicked out of school if I cheated.
Yeah.
So like at the end of the day, assessment can be done in a way that's like, cheating proof. We've solved that already, especially for something like coding. Just have them handwrite it.
During COVID, I moved away from that because we had to, right? So it made sense. It was like, I don't even want students to have to write code on paper. It doesn't even make sense to me. You're always looking things up and documentation. But then I think it was my TA who mentioned we should go back to doing that, at least for like exams, or quizzes and things
Exactly.
like that. They're still going to do all their coding at home for their assignments, but at least those points we can at least assess some type of knowledge.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of fear right now, but yeah, I
Yeah.
don't think that much has changed because yeah, you can still get as long as COVID doesn't happen again, knock on wood, right? Like, you get folks you can get students sitting in a chair writing on a piece of paper
Yeah.
and demonstrate what they know. Yeah.
How do you deal with skepticism from teachers? You said you do some outreach to schools and teachers. Teachers that say, I don't want my job to go away. I don't want to use AI in any way. How do you deal with that skepticism?
Yeah. So I think the two main pieces are like, especially if you're teaching maybe middle school, especially high school students, like
Yeah.
I think people are seeing nowadays, and I'd say like this is the number one reason that we've gotten to where we are today. A lot of it is like, yeah, we've done a good job executing as a company, but like, AI is much bigger than education, right? It is like the elephant in the room in every industry, and it
Yeah.
is changing every single industry at this point. There's no escaping it. And everyone's starting to see like, oh man, like the trajectory of change is only we're only getting started. This is really the tip of the iceberg. So I think a lot of teachers are seeing that too, right? Maybe
Yeah.
maybe their spouse works in a different industry that's getting revolutionized by AI. Maybe their students are applying to colleges and are struggling to choose what major they should go into because jobs are changing because of AI. I think a lot of teachers are starting to feel this responsibility that even if I'm just a computer science teacher, I don't necessarily teach the AI curriculum in my school because my school doesn't have that yet.
Yeah.
I have a responsibility to get my kids ready for the future.
I
So
see.
I think that is a door in to many teachers.
I see.
Look, even if you're worried about your students cheating because of AI, you got to admit, like, it's going to change the job they end up doing 5 years down the line,
Right.
right? So why not slightly start preparing them for that world? And even if it's like, let's just start with AI literacy, right? Let's just start teaching them about the basics of AI. That can be the wedge in for some teachers. And for others, it is that personalized learning aspect. And I think this percentage of teachers will grow over time. Again, going back to that world language example, when I'm working with a teacher who's very skeptical about using AI with their students, I go back to the problem that they're very likely to be facing. So if I'm talking to a Spanish teacher that's like, oh, I don't want to use any AI, I'll try to shift the conversation. I'll be like, okay, that's fine. Do you feel like your students are getting enough speaking practice right now? And
Right.
universally, it's like 100% of the time they'll say no. So I'll be like, okay, like just drop the AI part. Let's think of this as a tool that can give your students more speaking practice. Let's use that as a starting point. It happened to use AI under the hood to do that, right?
Right.
But that's technology. We don't have to think about the technology. Let's just focus on the problem it's solving for you. And I would say one of those two approaches usually works well of like, hey, there's no escaping this. This is part of the future. You got to get your kids ready for it. And also like, there's definitely areas where you're struggling right now to personalize learning, not because you're a bad teacher, not because we want to replace you, but just because there's one of you and you have 20 students, right? You have 100 students across 5 sections, right? So let's talk about that problem.
So part of it is they don't see the impact of the AI. And once they realize or learn about that, it's helpful. And the other part of it is get used to it. It's not going away.
Exactly. Yeah.
You ready for the lightning round?
Let's do it. Yeah.
30 seconds each. This first question, I know the answer, but I'm going to ask the question anyways. ChatGPT or Claude?
Day to day, I use ChatGPT actually.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay. What's a contrarian belief you hold about the future of education or edtech?
Ooh. So this is a much more of a personal view than a company view. But if AI gets really, really good, super intelligent, smarter than humans, humans will no longer be needed for economic productivity because AI will do everything for the economy.
Right.
And so much of how we measure the success of students today, and therefore the success of educational systems, is what jobs are kids getting out of school.
Right.
So if jobs in the traditional sense don't exist, the purpose of schools will totally change. It might only be about having an educated citizenry and learning STEM just might be equivalent to like working out. Like you might still do it for fun, like for
Right.
mental fitness, but it might not be needed for the economy. So that's rough for me because I grew up really passionate about STEM. I went to STEM for college, but like yeah, STEM might not be that relevant in the future.
I mean, it could be like learning for the purpose of learning. Like I'm going to learn about this because I'm interested in this.
Is like I lift weights. I'm not gonna be a bodybuilder, but like I just lift weights because I enjoy lifting weights and it makes me feel more fit.
Right.
I think that'll be STEM in the future, right? Like STEM is you're not gonna be able to get a job in STEM because AI will be doing all the STEM jobs, but like it's still satisfying to build things.
What keeps you up at night with regards to Flint?
Yeah. Ooh, tough question. I think the classic is like, are we doing enough? And the
Yeah.
challenge of that question is the answer is always no.
Yeah.
There's just infinite ways we could be doing better. And the constant challenge I have is I want to be pushing myself and our team to be operating always at 90%. It's really dangerous to go up to 100% because you create burnout really quickly.
Yeah.
You never know what 90% is. And the bar from 90 goes up over time, right? I'm much better at 90% productivity today than I was a year ago because I've just gotten more efficient. So knowing how to push, but not push too much is like the challenge that always stresses me out the most.
If you weren't developing and leading at Flint, what would you be doing?
Yeah, possibly. So two very different things. Possibly, probably just building another startup.
Yeah,
Real
I figured that.
yeah. If not, yeah, my hobbies and passions, like in an academic sense, outside of Flint, are learning about history, and I love reading the news. So I think mixing those two together, maybe writing a book about history or being a journalist, I think would be like a passion I'd fall back on. Yeah.
Or vibrating a book about history.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Is that a thing? Vibrating? I haven't heard that term before.
Don't think so. Yeah.
What's your favorite band right now?
So I haven't listened to much music since starting Flint. It's been very, very late in
Wow.
that department. I don't. They're not a band, but I listen to a good amount of rap. JID is one of my favorite kind of newer artists. And then of course listen to Kendrick and whatnot. But JID, I think he had an album come out like the year before I started Flint, and I've been listening to that a lot.
Oh, I see it. I'll check it out. Thanks.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks a lot, Sohan. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you, Brand. Have a good
Thanks.
one.
Bye.
Yep.
Thanks for watching. If you like this, be sure to subscribe. More interviews and demos coming soon.